at the time of the seed, the effect doesn't exist yet. And an effect is only an effect in relation to a cause. So it would mean that at the time of the cause, the seed is not a cause, because in relation to which is a cause, or in dependence on which is a cause, doesn't exist yet. You see the same logic? Same logic. So
a good example would be when somebody is born and he's not given a name yet.
yes, exactly. So, like Vada is saying, if at the time someone is born, right, and he be called
his mother maybe.
his father or his mother call him.
In the hospital, there is no mother name.
Ah, so mother's name, okay. So at some point he's called Manu. Okay, Manu. So he's called Manu, okay? So then you say, when Manu was little, when Manu was born, okay, you still. So it's okay, retrospectively say, oh, when Manu was born, was he Manu? Yes. Because when you apply the name, you don't apply it to the previous life. If you were aware of the previous life, you wouldn't, well, maybe, in terms of some of the lamas, then say, oh, the Dalai Lama in his previous life. Okay, so they apply it even to a previous life. But in this case, in case of Manu, it's like from the moment he was conceived, basically. That's how we define. So therefore, even retrospectively, he's Manu. So that works. But we get caught up with this time thing. Okay, all right. So just remember, next time you have that view, you won't have it right away, but if you go into a certain reasoning, how everything is merely imputed, sooner or later this question comes up. So then just think, what about at the time of the seed? Is the seed not the cause of the sprout? Because a cause is only a cause in dependence on a result. But if at that time the result does not yet exist, how can we call it as cause?
But it's vice versa, isn't it? It's not a result because the cause does not exist anymore.
You can take it the other way around. Yes, you can also say at the time of the result. It means because its cause doesn't exist, right? So, but I use the cause because I'm saying everything is dependent on imputation, but the imputation hasn't taken place yet, just as the result hasn't taken place yet. But you could also, yeah, as the boss is saying, put it the other way around. So the sprout is not the result of something because a result is dependent on a cause, and the cause doesn't exist at that time. But then we're okay. At that time, we're totally okay. Okay? Anyway. So what you do when you do this analysis, and this is not going into the details on this, it's just reminding us, actually when you have read the 18th chapter, usually you've done the first. So you're going back to the meditation you've done. Really, this whole thing is a meditation manual. Alright. Anyway, going back to this. Now, what does the first chapter do? It talks about, for instance, at the time of the seed, the sprout is arising. Okay? The sprout is being produced. So we have a difficulty with that. If I ask you, when the sprout, is this thing arising or has it arisen? Is it arising or has it arisen?
Both.
Both.
If it's moment by moment, it's both.
Yeah.
If it's
No,
moment by moment,
I'm not talking about each moment. I'm talking about this thing itself. It has come into existence.
Yeah.
If it exists, it must have arisen.
Yeah.
You're right. The future moments, they are arising. But what is here right now? For something to exist, it must have arisen. That which is arising is not existent now. That which is arising...
Still arising
it's a
is not
potential.
like present?
No, arising is future.
It's potential.
Like it is
The arising happens right now. But what is arising has not yet arisen. It's not yet there. Does that make sense? So, at the time of the seed, okay? This is the seed. This is the sprout. At the time of the sprout, this has arisen. It's there. It has arisen. When is it arising? At the time of its cause. At the time of the cause, the seed is coming into existence. It hasn't come into existence yet. It is coming into existence. We always get those wrong. It's
only when the sprout exists already, no?
The sprout is not there yet. Monday, the sprout is growing. Monday, the sprout is being produced. Only on Tuesday, the seed is there. So,
The sprout.
sorry, the sprout is there. During the time of the seed, the sprout is arising. On Tuesday, the sprout is there. Now it has arisen.
But you can only say that if the sprout exists, you can say that the seed is arising. Only when you see the...
No, the seed has arisen. The seed on Monday is there.
Yeah.
The seed has
But
arisen.
arising, I'm saying.
No, the seed is not arising. The sprout is arising on Monday. So just to lay the parameters. So on Monday you have a seed, which on Tuesday has given rise to the sprout. Now, what happens exactly? We say it is the cause of... We kind of use this... We never really think about it. And that's what Nagarjuna does in the first chapter. What do you actually mean? It is the cause of the seed. The cause of the sprout. At the time of the seed, the sprout arises. But there is no sprout. If it existed inherently, if the sprout existed inherently, and were inherently risen, it would have to be there at the time of the seed. If it were there at the time of the seed, because it's arising, it exists inherently, we just label the seed is arising on the basis of the seed transforming, and tomorrow becoming a seed, sprout. So based on that, therefore, we label seed is the cause of sprout, seed gives rise to sprout. It's just labeled. There is no sprout there. Right? There's no sprout there. And still it works. We label seed is producing sprout. If it existed inherently, the sprout would exist already. It must be there because something produces it. You can't produce something that doesn't exist. You can't produce flying Donald Trump. Doesn't exist. Or Donald Trump on this table, or Bibi on this table doesn't exist. At least not right now. I'm glad I'm always with leftists in this room. No one comes to those courses who votes for Bibi, it seems. So I'm not offending anyone. Donald Trump is pretty safe. So anyway, no, I'm just kidding. Whoever I meet, whatever I use. So right now, there's no Bibi on this table. Okay, so Bibi on this table doesn't exist. Can I produce Bibi on this table? Right? Well, yeah, I can kind of ask him to come, so when he's on the way to be sitting here. But like something flying cows, they don't exist. Or certain things, horns of a rabbit don't exist. If you have an animal that looks like a rabbit and has horns, it's just not called rabbit. Okay? So, therefore, horns of a rabbit are not said, or the child of an infertile woman who has been infertile since birth. Okay, so that doesn't exist, which is why I cannot produce it. But if the sprout at the time of the seed, if it were to exist inherently, then you would have to say it has to exist at the time, because you can't produce something that doesn't exist. So you see that logic? This is also what the 7th chapter deals with, Buddha Palita. That's why I'm so passionate about. And the 1st chapter of Nagarjuna. So we'll do that next year. It comes at the end. It's really challenging. Okay. But here...
Buddha Palita? Which book is it?
Buddha Palita? The book is called Buddha Palita. The author is called Buddha Palita. Yeah, it's confusing. No, actually there's a text called Buddha Palita. So on this text has 3 commentaries. No, 4. No. Indian commentaries. One is by Buddha Palita, one is by Chandakirti, one is by Baba Viveka, and one is by Avalokitevatra, not Tvatra. Avalokitevatra. So that's like in our commentaries, it just mentions that commentator. But we usually depend upon the explanation of mainly Buddha Palita and mainly Chandakirti. Baba Viveka less, but also it's also used. And Baba Viveka and Buddha Palita's text is just commentary to this. It's just called commentary on this. So it doesn't really just commentary. Every commentary is a commentary. Like every commentary on emptiness in the Nanda tradition is a commentary on this. So that doesn't help. So they add the name Buddha Palita. They say the name Buddha Palita, that is a commentary. Sorry, the text Buddha Palita, that is a... Right? Because if you have only the name of the author and it has this generic word, Buddha Palita, generic name, commentary on this, then you have to give an extra name. All you know about the author is that he's called Buddhapalita, so you call the text Buddhapalita. And His Holiness is teaching it right now, as in like every year he continues teaching it. Alright. Quite difficult. Some of it really difficult. So, here going back to the relationship of causes and effects, or causes and results, saying that phenomena don't exist inherently. So whatever arises in dependent on something else, is neither identical to that thing nor different from it. Now, previously we took the I, it's labeled on mind and body, okay? It doesn't exist inherently, because if it did, it would be either one with the body or totally different from it, or one with mind and body or totally different from it. Remember the logic? Now you can do the same with cause and effect. A cause and its effect. Their relationship, with regard to their relationship. So one is dependent on the other. Actually, in the Prasangika school, they're dependent, mutually dependent. In the lower schools, I would say the effect is dependent on the cause. Why? Because if it didn't have the cause preceding it, you couldn't have the result. That makes sense. But they don't see it so much the other way around, because you can have a seed but no sprout. So the seed does not depend on the sprout to exist. But because phenomena are merely labeled, the seed, being a cause, also depends on the result. To be called a cause. To be called a cause, it needs a result. So in that way, it goes both ways. It's not just from the point of view of its nature, coming into existence, independence on a sprout, or coming into existence, independence on a seed. In that way, the lower systems, does that make sense? That the lower systems say, oh, the seed depends on the sprout, but the sprout doesn't depend on, the sprout depends on the seed. But for the seed to come into existence, you don't need the sprout. This later arising sprout, you don't need. But from the Prasangika school point of view, a seed is actually referring to that which we label. So we apply the label seed. We apply the label cause. Why? Because there is a result. So it does depend on its result to be called a cause. To be called a seed, it depends on the sprout to be labeled that. In the lower systems, they say it's intrinsic in the seed to be a seed. It's not depending on something else to call it that. It is a seed. Does that make sense? So the only dependence that they identify is that the sprout relies on the seed. Okay, so they say they say that the sprout is inherently a sprout, but it still depends on the seed to come into existence. Because it's inherently a sprout, okay, being called a result does not depend on its cause, because it's inherently a result. It's inherently a result, so it doesn't depend on its cause to be called a result. That's what they would say. It's inherently a result. But it still depends on the seed, because to grow as into a sprout, you need the seed. In the higher schools, they say it's both. Not only does it depend on the seed to grow into a sprout, but also saying it's a result is only because it's nothing intrinsic in it that tells us it's a sprout, it's a result. It is only in relation to the fact that it had a cause. And we say it's a result.
And then it's going to be a cause for something.
And it's going to be a cause in relation to something else. So that's why we say, like, a woman is a mother in relation to a child. There's nothing inside the woman to say, oh, there's this little white dot or red dot that makes her a mother, for instance. Not like that. No, it's only in relation to another person that we say mother. And in relation to a mother, we say this is a daughter. Okay, so it's just labeled. It's nothing inherent. Just clarification. Only clarification.
Yes.
Yeah.
If the seed cannot be called a seed before there is a sprout.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it can be. It can be. But if it exists inherently, it cannot. No, I'm saying it can be called. Of course, we call it that. But if it existed intrinsically, if it was in and of itself, it wouldn't depend on us calling it such. And it wouldn't, we say it's produced by the seed at the time of the seed. If it was inherent, it would have to be there right now. We couldn't just be referring to it because later it arises. It would have to exist right now. Anyway, this is if you're interested, we can do it next year in the first chapter.
I'm wondering, is it depending on causes and conditions? Because seeds will give rise to sprout only if they have the conditions. Some seeds will not have the condition.
Yeah.
They will never arise to.
Yeah, that's what I said before. That's what I said. A seed does not necessarily give rise to a
Yes.
sprout.
Yeah.
Yes, that is true. But when you have a sprout, that depends on causes and conditions.
Yes, but I'm talking about how can you call a seed independent of its result. So this would, I think.
Okay. Because it has. Okay. All right. Oh yeah. This is the other part that we mentioned in the first chapter. We call it a seed because it has the potential to give rise to a sprout. Whether that happens or not is a different matter. But the whole discussion: what does the potential mean? What does potential actually mean? Right? So, sorry, I'm taking it away from that. But yeah, so you're right. It's called a cause. It's called a cause, although it may not have a result because it has that potential. If the other conditions come together, it gives rise to that. But they may not come together. So we say it is the cause of such and such because it has the potential to give rise to that.
So a woman is a mother.
Pardon?
So a woman is a mother.
Well, if she's infertile,
No, she can adopt.
pardon?
She can
No, but you know, a mother, you don't call a mother unless she has a child. This is how we use the word. You can choose to use the word differently, then I don't know, then I'm a mother. But
she has the potential.
Yeah.
pardon?
But she has the potential.
She has the potential, but it's like how we use the word. Yeah, but just because something has a potential, we don't call it this, that, and the other. And also, a seed, even if it doesn't give rise to a sprout, it always gives rise to a result. A seed always has a result.
What do you mean? Always has a result.
A seed always gives rise to its next moment,
Ah.
Yeah.
which is maybe a broken, a dried seed or whatever, but it always gives rise to.
A woman also.
Nah?
A woman also.
But not
Yes,
a
but
mother.
that's not why we call her a woman. You
Not
see,
a mother.
well, mother, we don't call her mother. You see, this is why phenomena are not inherently called this and that. This is how we as society, we decide what we call what.
Again, conventional.
It's conventional, exactly. So that's why we say conventional. So we don't say someone is a mother. If someone had the potential to have a child, we would call them a mother, then I'd be a mother. Okay? But an infertile mother, well, that's to be seen, whether she has the potential, because there's something, even if the causes and conditions came together, she wouldn't give birth. But if in my case, I don't know, maybe I'm infertile, I have no idea, I never tested it. But in case I was not, I would be a mother. But that's not how we use the word, right? We call something a cause if it has, at the time of its existence, the potential to give rise to a result. But we call a mother only a mother when she has a child.
Like long and short. Everything has the potential to be short if there was something long, but we don't call it short before. Everything which is relative, we don't give the name, the phenomena, the name of the potential. Like mother, like short, like this.
But everything is relative. All phenomena are relative.
But the seed, we don't give it the name of the potential.
In relation to something that comes later, could come later.
Even though it might not come later. But the
Yeah.
short period, we don't call
No,
it a
no,
short
but
period.
anyway,
Just because
there's
it's a
always
potential.
something later. It's always a cause. It's always a cause.
But the later
If
name
the
is a different name.
Pardon?
The later.
Yeah. So a
This
cause
has
is
potential.
always called a cause in relation to something that comes later.
This has a cause to be long or short.
Pardon?
This has a cause, it has the potential
Yeah.
to be long.
It doesn't even have the potential. It is long and short, both. It doesn't even have a potential. It is right now.
I think
It is right now long or short, long and short.
It's about different relationships. There's the relationship of cause and effect is one kind of relationship, and the cause of a mother and child is a different one. It's not a causal one so much.
No,
Because
it's
the
not a
mother is
causal
there as long as there is child. There's child is it's a
Yes.
different kind of relationship.
No, it's not about relationship. It's about what you determined. Yeah. So whether you call it this, that, or the other, that depends on the relationship. The way you just said it. So the relationship, it's not just that they have different relationships. You can have all relationships with everything.
Dependence.
Yeah.
It's not that we call something a name because the dependence is a dependence of a cause and effect.
Yeah.
You might give it a name because the dependence of different kind of relationship.
Yes.
Or Okay?
Yes.
So short and long, or Eastern Mountain and Western Mountain, it's not a causal relationship.
It's a reference.
So
It can be, but it doesn't have to
It
be.
can be. It doesn't have to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly true. I would totally agree. So why we call certain things something, is that's how we. So you cannot argue with the Buddha about it. We can argue with society about it, right? Why would you call it a mother or not? Okay, all right. Maybe we could start calling someone a mother when they have the potential. If we start doing that,
Sometimes like there's
Mother Earth.
no, like sometimes like you have the new Caesar, and he's 3 years old, but you call him already Caesar, and
Scissor?
Scissor?
Okay, Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar.
Caesar. Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
Sorry. I thought you
But
said Caesar.
because conventionally we already want to prepare him and we want to prepare everyone, so although it's not manifested yet, we already call it because we have the intention. So sometimes
she's talking about-
conventionally,
Okay,
we
like
do
Manu,
that.
when he was born, we called him already Manu. So Julius Caesar, or maybe let's say Trump, President Trump, as a child.
No.
We may refer to President Trump as a child, and we say, right, you use the
No,
word, but
why
he's not the
don't
president
No,
then.
sometimes like in a, maybe I say it in Hebrew and
It's indoctrination. It has nothing to do with anything.
yeah, like if it's in a place, let's say many years ago, and when this little child is going to be the new Caesar, right?
If he dies,
Okay, maybe leave it for later. Maybe let's leave it for later because it takes too long. I take too long to understand this now. Sorry.
Just clarification.
Clarification.
Would it be right to say that verses 1 to 9 are dealing with emptiness, the negation part, and 10 is the other side of the coin, the dependent arising?
No, first is refutation of self, then refutation of mind, then how that a person who realizes selflessness is also selfless, then what is the goal of realizing selflessness, and then bringing in emptiness. So liberation, the goal is liberation, but for that you also need to realize emptiness. Then it's emptiness. How did the Buddha teach selflessness? How did the Buddha teach emptiness? And then emptiness, 5 characteristics, and then the relationship now of cause and effect. Okay, now we have the relationship of, in the sense that relationship of cause and effect, and also they don't exist inherently in the context of emptiness. In the context of emptiness, previously we took selflessness. First was selflessness, which of course is a type of emptiness. Okay, and then
Phenomena.
yes. So emptiness can mean selflessness of emptiness of the person, or emptiness of phenomena other than the person. All right. And so for liberation, you need that. Okay. So maybe I just say slowly again, that you don't get too confused. So first, you refute the self through the reasoning. Okay. Self either one with the aggregates or separate. Just with the parts. So emptiness in terms of taking the parts of the self, and the self lacks inherent existence. And then you refute mind. So if there's no self, there's also not mind. That's already taking you into emptiness, because mind can refer to the body, refers to the body, refers to, okay, my child is again selflessness, because the child lacks a self, but my body, my this. So those are phenomena other than the self. And then the person who realizes, or that which realizes selflessness, is also selfless, it also lacks inherent existence. So what is the goal of realizing self, the lack of self, the lack of mind, is to eliminate birth, samsaric birth. So for that, verse 5, you require realization of emptiness. So emptiness needs to be realized. So selflessness and emptiness are the same thing. Okay, so you need to realize. Liberation requires the realization of emptiness. It just mentions emptiness. Sometimes more the emphasis on self, sometimes more the emphasis on phenomena other than the self. Then, how did the Buddha teach with respect to the self? Sometimes he says there was a self, then there's none, etc. And actually with regard to this emptiness or selflessness, that does not exist inherently. What is expressed, even when you talk about emptiness, what you express that doesn't exist inherently. The object, when you take it to mind, it doesn't exist inherently. So emptiness itself is not generated and ceased, it's just like nirvana. Then what is the process of realizing emptiness? How did the Buddha kind of set it forth? As in like gradually taking there. Not just saying there's a self, there's no self. But more specifically with regard to impermanence. Okay, so things are impermanent, things are da-da-da, as I explained before. Change momentarily, don't change momentarily, it's not emphasized. More that they go out of existence. Then changing momentarily, and so forth. I already said that. So emptiness has 5 characteristics. Emptiness has 5 characteristics as set forth here. But then phenomena also come into existence in dependence on a cause. So what is the relationship between cause and effect? Is that they depend on each other. So are they inherently one or are they inherently different? The cause and its effect. Okay, so it's still emptiness but taking a different focus. Previously it was just self and the aggregates. Here's self and its cause, or self and its effect, or any phenomenon. So if you look at the first verse, it is comparing an object and its parts. Now you're comparing an object and its cause, or an object and its result. How do those two relate to each other? Okay, so it seems pretty random, and it is. It's like if you go through a meditation, you look at things here and you look at things there. There's no fixed way in which he could set forth these verses. But he set forth these verses to his disciples, and he felt if they meditated this way, this is effective, then they go here, then they go there. You'll see in chapter 23, it's all about, do the afflictions exist inherently? Then what gave rise to the afflictions? What are the objects that gave rise? What are the objects of the previous minds? And it takes everything into consideration, looks at it from different angles. And just looking at it from different angles, you could start here, you could start there. Right? If you were to meditate on this, if you were to make notes, if you make notes now and you look at your notes again and you read your notes 3 times, you go, wow, this makes perfect sense. But if you don't take notes and you just hear me saying, I'm just saying more and more and more, you forgot what I said earlier on, then it's like, wow, it's so random. So if you just write down on each verse what it says and you look again, you go, oh, that makes sense. He goes from here, and he does this, and he does that. But right now it seems overwhelming. So if you're interested to maybe listen to the recording again or take a commentary, and then just make your own, write a short summary of each verse. Read through it again and you go, ah, that's how he got from here to there. And there could be different reasons. I know this is what's overwhelming, it's all this information. But if you were to really, this is a meditation manual. If you sit down and you really meditate on this chapter, right? And you do it a few times, it's extremely effective. Because it's not just to be studied, it's to be meditated on. Yeah. And I think it becomes more obvious with the next chapter, which I'm trying to get to. No, I'm glad for your questions, of course, but in the end, I really want to finish. Okay, so if you take a cause and its effect, either they're identical or they're different. If they exist intrinsically, if a seed and a sprout exist intrinsically, either they're the same or they're totally separate. Because if they exist intrinsically, they couldn't really be independent on each other. Right? Although we say it depends on something, this is how our mind works. Whatever arises dependent on something else. We say the sprout arises in dependence on the seed, but it exists intrinsically. Okay? So first we kind of say, yes, it arises in dependence on that. But we also think that it exists inherently. So there's already a contradiction in our view. If we think the sprout exists inherently, then the seed and the sprout, their relationship is either that of being one or different. The same or not the same. Of course they're not the same. If the seed and the sprout were the same, the seed would be permanent. Right? Because it wouldn't give rise to something else, it would be the same. So it would be permanent, would not change moment by moment. If the seed and the sprout are different, but they exist inherently, they couldn't depend on each other. If they don't depend on each other, they would be totally unrelated. And then the seed couldn't give rise to the sprout. The seed would be cut, annihilated, and just go out of existence. See the logic? It's beautiful.
It's like the aggregate in the beginning.
It's the same analysis, but here's a little different because the aggregates and the person exist at the same time. So you look at the I versus the aggregates that exist right now. Here we're taking the seed that comes first and the sprout that comes later. What is their relationship?